Brilliant, Catherine, thanks for that. So the final item on the agenda for today, and we have to finish at 4, I'm informed, is Sara to talk about fundraising report, and I suspect that will morph into closing remarks.
Well, actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to have a very brief 2 minutes from Suzanne in a minute about fundraising. And those 2 coins that you saw up there, she's going to talk a wee bit about those. They come from our Dave over here as an idea. We think they're wonderful. But before we do that, I am going to rattle through now what has not been publicly available or published prior, and that is exactly what we are doing, have done with Salvo, and where we're going now, and where we are, and what comes next, which I think just might be quite exciting. So, everybody here is here because they've understood that the so-called political route, forcing Westminster, holding the feet to the fire, etc., is a pile of hogwash. Isn't going to happen, cannot happen, there is no route. What we've discovered, and we owe, and Scotland owes Alf Baird a great debt for this, is that the best route for Scotland would be to be listed for decolonisation. Now, we've learned an awful lot in the meantime, so to fill this picture out. What we know is that Scotland had a treaty. What we know is that treaty had terms, limits and conditions. What we know is that not one of those, let that sink in, not one of those was honoured or implemented or treated as binding. So why does it matter about decolonisation? It matters because there are only 2 possible situations for Scotland to occupy. Either we are part of a state that was voluntarily created and that now has an identity, a legal personality, which all states actually, all legitimate states have. Or we were what is known internationally as a dependency, otherwise known as a colony. So it's one or the other. There's nothing in between. There's nothing else that we can be. We know that we're not, for instance, what they call the dependent territory. We know we're not a crown principality or whatever. What helped us was the discovery that there is, as I said earlier, only one clearly defined status given to Scotland, which has been signed off by both Houses of Parliament and the monarch, and that is that Scotland is a nation which entered the Union as a voluntary partner, not as a dependency. So we know that Scotland, as part of the UK, has no voice of its own in the Council of Europe or in the United Nations or any other international body. So who is there to say this is Scotland's constitutional position, this is her status? Only the British establishment, only the UK. One exception to having a voice is to form a liberation movement. This was one of the things that Alf contributed. A liberation movement doesn't have status within the UN General Assembly in that it isn't a represented state, but it can have observer status, it has recognition as an NGO, and it can make approaches to different bodies. Most importantly, a liberation movement exists in order to obtain listing for a nation for decolonisation. And you make your case that you are a dependency and not a voluntary partner in the state. Let me just clarify, because all this, the legal stuff does your head in, but that statement that was produced in 1952 was also given to the United Nations. Scotland is a nation and entered the Union as a voluntary partner and not as a dependency. That meant, and a lot of people misunderstand this, that meant that Scotland was deemed to have exercised its right to self-determination in one of the recognised ways, internationally recognised ways, that is, by voluntary integration into a larger state. That self-determination is deemed to have been exercised in 1707. Done. An opportunity to change your mind apparently was given in 2014 under a non-constitutional opinion poll only, franchise to every man, his dog and his neighbour referendum, which we know was rigged in 2014. It didn't meet any international standard, but that's what they can say. We voluntarily created this state, and we've had a chance to say we didn't want to continue to do so. That's the position of the UK state internationally. What that means, if we were voluntarily integrated into the larger state, is that the state that came into being, like a child having rights above those of its parents, that state has rights that sit above the rights of the component nations. With me? That's why Westminster has been able to say you wouldn't get international recognition. If you had a wildcat referendum, if you declared UDI, you wouldn't get international recognition. And they are right. Look at what happened with Kosovo. Look at the amount of time and effort and attention that went into that, including an advisory referral to the ICJ on whether its declaration of independence was legitimate. We would have to be an exception in the way the Kosovo was, or, as it makes clear in the Kosovo ruling, we would already have to be what is understood to be a dependency. Where we have got to now is that we believe we can show a very clear case that Scotland is a dependency under two provisions of international law. One, we are a non-self-governing territory. Two, we are a people and nation subject to a foreign sovereignty. We can show that because rather than a new crown for the whole United Kingdom ever coming into existence, Scotland was added to the English crown. Scotland's crown was left in place. Scotland's crown is administered by the English crown. The English coronation oath was extended to Scotland, and the English crown, the one that you saw Charles parading around the place with all that medieval pomp and flummery being, in Westminster and put on his head, it's the crown as a constitutional entity that goes back to 1066. It is the English crown. It has not altered. It did not, except to add Scotland to it, it did not alter its constitutional makeup in any way. And we know that the Scottish crown is entirely different. The Scottish crown is the people, with the monarch as the first among equals, wearing that crown and representing that crown. Nothing happened to the English crown. It remained the English crown, just as the Parliament remained the English Parliament. Therefore, we were added to a foreign crown. We are administered by a foreign sovereignty. We have our own crown. That's a foreign sovereignty. That means we can show in law that Scotland is a colony. And we now have a movement which can get the platform just to say that. And that's the liberation movement. And in this that is why this election this week is so important. Because in this coming week, we elect that committee. It's democratically elected from 11,000 members who will all have that opportunity to vote. And it can then register with the United Nations as an organ that can get that message out to the international community. No, we are not a voluntary partner, and we are not in a voluntary partnership. We are a dependency, a colony, and we are administered by the colonising state. That is our first step, and it's the first real step for Scotland, coming out of the corner fighting since 1745. So you're part of something really important. We all are. We will be pushing for recognition. We will be pushing for that listing for decolonisation. The minute that happens, and this is before we go to the ICJ, the minute that happens, Section 30 is in the bin. Yes. It's gone. And that is because the UK government is bound by its international agreements and international law to which it is signatory to decolonise. The minute that our position is actually recognised, that is the minute when they have nothing to say anymore about Scottish independence. Nothing. They're the colonising state, and we are the people who have the right to decolonisation. It's going to be a fight, but we're damn well going to win it. because it's winnable. And the thing about Scotland is, if it can be won, we'll win it.
Yes.
And we will. What happens then? So we have a KC who is looking at all this, and I don't know how he feels about it. He's the first lawyer in God knows how many centuries who's actually looking now to see what does all this add up to? What does it mean? What is Scotland's status? Where do we see the proof that this is a colony here? Where do we see it de jure and de facto? We'll wait to the end for questions. This will come in various parts, as I've said, in four separate sections, the draft until the final opinion. That opinion will go forward to the C24 committee. But it will also be used. By that time, I hope we will have made some headway, and we will also we'll have our Liberation Committee working here, we'll have Salvo on the ground here, we'll have the New Scotland UN Committee as the diplomatic representatives of liberation at international level, pushing to get this understood and bringing this opinion forward, at which point we will then look for a friendly nation, a nation that has sympathy with what we're saying and what has happened to Scotland. And it's amazing how quickly people get it. We had three of us, Bill, Ian and myself, had a meeting with representatives from the Baltic States Alliance just over a week ago, a week past Thursday. And they had been recommended to meet with us by Bruno Kaufmann. They're part of the European Initiatives Group. They had a very particular view of what Scotland was and how it operated. And repeatedly during the meeting, I had Elizabeth, who is a law lecturer in Poland. I said, but this isn't how the world understands Scotland. This isn't the way we see Scotland. And she kept coming back to that, and I'd say, no, we know that. That's why we're doing this. And here's the truth. Right to the end. And right at the end, they kind of talked very briefly amongst themselves, and she looked back and she said, it seems to me that the Scotland, that you're describing, this nation, is well worth preserving, it's well worth saving. And I said, yes, we think so too. And we're in danger of extinction, really, as a nation. And she said, what can we do to help? And then started talking about the contacts they have within the ICJ and the ICC. So this is what happens with this outreach. This is what's waiting for us in terms of international friendship. And surely, amongst all those countries, one will say, we are entitled under international law. We consider that there is a nation here who is still colonized, and they are, this is international law, to get a referral to the ICJ for an advisory opinion on the rights of Scotland as a nation. And by the way, its rights to restitution and reparation, and to have our free ports declared void, and so on and so forth. So this is where we are. With all that going into place, we're coming up to 2026. What about 2026? Well, do you understand? If we've done our job, if we've succeeded, that playing field is now clear. No Section 30, no Westminster permission, no, this lawful state has the right to object, because it's not, it's a colonizer. We now have this open permissions, open field, so that if the people of Scotland decide through a democratic event that they wish to decolonize, which is what independence means, the international community is then ready and waiting to recognise a newly independent Scotland. If we did it the other way around, that wouldn't happen. If we had the event, as they understand Scotland's status, we'd be beginning a fight which would go all the way to the ICJ contentious case, which can take decades, etc. We have this waiting. Then whatever we do that is democratic will have international recognition. And the definition of an independent nation is that it is recognised by other nations, other states. That's it. How do we do that? Well, here's the really exciting bit. Here's what we think. We've got a year and a half. Imagine that in 2026, people people from all over Scotland who would never have thought of standing for Parliament, never have thought of themselves as politicians, were willing to stand. Right across Scotland. Maybe some from existing parties, but with one thing on their manifesto: independence and the sovereignty of the Scottish people, which is direct democracy. Sovereignty in practice is direct democracy. It's the people telling the government what to do. If the people want a referendum, they get it. If the people want to stop something the government is doing, they can do it by veto. That's direct democracy. You have the power. That's all they put on their manifesto. Independence across the place. Maybe some from Alba, maybe some from SNP, maybe some rogues from something. I don't care. If they have that on their manifesto. Obviously, there is already one party that does that, which is the ISP. I've always thought that what would happen is that the ISP would turn into Sinn Féin in the way that happened after, after the Dublin Proclamation in Ireland. We want to see that manifesto everywhere in Scotland. We've got hubs all over Scotland. Now imagine we mobilise. Right across Scotland, every hub. Hopefully by then there will be more than 7,500 Salvo members. And every one of those mobilises to get those candidates elected. And we flood Holyrood. We simply take it over. We could do that, couldn't we?
Yeah.
We could get that. I'm still convinced, Colette, that what we'll see is the ISP and a new First Minister, but there we go. That's the mandate. Independence and for the sovereign people of Scotland. Direct democracy. With that democratic event having taken place, that's actually it, guys. That's international recognition. That's the democratic event. We're independent. And we've also elected those who will immediately turn around and hand power back to the people and bring in direct democracy and ensure that our constitution comes back, that we are the Crown of Scotland. We already own our territorial assets, no need to nationalise them. They're nationalised by law anyway. Common good at the heart of government, and direct democracy, direct accountability to the people, and all that that can bring. One event, once we've cleared the ground for it in 2026. That's it. Then we're independent. So if you're up for it, let's do it. Dave would like me to point out that one of the other advantages of getting international recognition for our plight is that during any referendum or election, such as the one we're talking about in 2026, the BBC is not allowed to interfere. It's got to be impartial. It's going to have to have international observers. We get all that. You would give us a free and fair, a chance at a free and fair vote. Before we leave, I don't know if where are we? All right, we're done. I'm going to ask Dave to play us out. One of our members, Andy Doherty, sent in a wee Salvo song, and I liked it so much, I thought that I would get Dave to play us out. And can I just finish by thanking everybody? Sorry we ran out of time. And it was great to see you all, and we'll see you soon. A big thank you to everybody. I'm being an idiot here. A huge thank you to everybody that set this up, the work it took to put this together today, the ladies and girls that helped with the merch, Dave here on the signs, I think we've got the best people in the world, and I
I think with the people we have, Scotland's in safe hands. Have a great rest of your weekend, everybody. Oh, and I'm sorry about the sovereign coins. We'll send you all emails about it. Suzanne will be happy she's not speaking.